Hello, everyone, and welcome to this panel. I'm David Murray. It has been a long time since I've seen many of you Plato folks who've known me from past Elevates. I enjoy participating in panels and helping to moderate some awesome conversations with some amazing people. So with that, I'd love to start this panel. We have the topic is in sickness and in health, maintaining morale and engagement through hard times. And we have here Kathryn Koehler from Netflix and Gerhard Esterhuizen from Rescale, and excited to get this started. So welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. So diving in first, just to kind of set the stage, if each of you don't mind sharing, a couple minutes about yourself and your background, what brought you here, and then we'll go from there. So Kathryn, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, absolutely. You'll have to excuse my froggy voice. I have COVID at the moment. So this is a particularly relevant topic. So my name is Kathryn Koehler. I am the Director of Productivity Engineering at Netflix. I've been there for about 2 years now. We work as a central engineering organization, so building tools and infrastructure and platforms for all of our fellow Netflix developers. And before that, I worked at the Chan Zuckerberg initiative, heading up engineering for the science org. And so I'm really happy to be here. This is a very important topic today, and I'm thrilled to be with the two of you.
I'm Gerhard Esterhuizen, been SVP Engineering at Rescale for the past 2.5 years. This is actually the third growth stage startup I do in a row. So it used to be Cloudflare, then Segment, now Rescale. And then one thing that's universal about life at one of these types of startups at this stage is the constant and high pace of change. And so very excited to talk about how to lead and help engineers through, specific types of scary change, because we do a lot of that, change management and leading through change. So thanks for participation. I'm excited to be here with Kathryn and David.
Awesome. Well, then let's dive in. This is a little bit of a heavier topic, but when we talk about navigating hard times, there's a number of hard times that probably a lot of different folks at a lot of different organizations are experiencing right now. Obviously layoffs is maybe one that comes to mind for a lot of folks because they see it. But in addition, the market itself and a lot of the challenges that are happening there, the fundraising environment as well, particularly if you're at a startup that's kind of relying on that. And then there's probably other things that happen just day to day. So maybe just kicking this off in terms of hard times, or change management in these types of hard times, what would each of you say is your what's been most helpful for you to navigate those hard times as a leader in your organizations?
Yeah, I can go first with this one. I would say that even no matter what the change is, it can be pretty scary for people, even if it's clear why you're making the change, or if you're growing an organization, different is scary for a lot of folks. And what helps me as a leader navigate change with my teams is transparency. Like, this is why we are changing. These are the goals. These are the principles. This is what we're trying to solve for. Hopefully, I've already built up some trust in the bank with the team, using transparency throughout, leadership, not just in times of change. And just being human, right? Really understanding what it feels like from their perspective to be going through this kind of change. What does it feel like as an IC, an individual contributor, or somebody who may be a little bit lower down, who doesn't feel as if they have agency in the decision making that's happening above them? So the humanity, the transparency, the openness, and really sticking to core principles and what are we trying to achieve so that people can rationalize why this change is needed.
Thank you. Attaching, you mentioned the human part of it. When a change like this happens, people often get very stuck in the tactics and how we're going to do it and what are the details. And often that's not the important part. It's important that you get that right, but it's not the piece that we should be spending all our time on. And the human angle that's the piece we should be caring about most. The thing that I think is really important as a leader is that when this happens, own it. and be deliberate about how you execute. So sitting around waiting for someone else to fix it is not going to work. Time is not going to make it better. Someone else is not going to lead your org through this. So as leaders, that's the time to step up, get in front of the company. As Kathryn said, raise the value of transparency. Yes, have the hard conversations. And then realize what people are going through. People are going to have questions. If there's an information vacuum or a knowledge vacuum, it's going to be filled by scary thoughts. So be proactive. Understand those thoughts. Understand the actual questions behind the questions. If someone asks a question, what is the actual fear that they're expressing? What's the concern they have? And make time and spend the effort to go and address that and lead folks to it. I think that's
Gerhard, you bring up like something that I love to tell my leaders below and above me, like any gaps in communication, it's human nature to fill that with misinformation. So it's your job to fill those gaps. And it's even okay just to say at this point in time, I don't know, but we're working through it, rather than going silent and then people fretting and generating all of these alternative scenarios, which are typically a lot worse than reality. So I really like the fact that you said that.
I love that both of you clearly come from a very empathy-driven place of sharing your own humanity and also connecting with the humanity of those at the organization, because without that, I think all of us have probably experienced leaders who are very strong in their delivery and may lack some of that empathy, and that can sometimes create disconnection, with you as an IC hearing from them. So that's awesome. And then Kathryn, you're mentioning that idea of the vacuum. This is something that we hear often when it comes to like PR crises, for example, when an organization is, has something going on, that silence is sometimes the worst thing that you can do, because when you communicate, it fills that vacuum of story with, reality, even if the reality isn't pretty. So I appreciate you surfacing that.
Yeah.
So obviously when talking about hard times, layoffs is one relevant topic. I think there are many other hard times that, I think it'd be great for us to talk through, but there are definitely folks who are listening right now who may be preparing or thinking for themselves that they may be needing to go through these hard conversations. Some folks maybe have never done it before. Some folks, it might be a large group of people, for example, and they may only have like the wisdom of Googling to be able to get help with how to navigate that. So acknowledging that this is completely hypothetical, and I am not in any way insinuating that anybody is laying off anybody right now, I think it would be really helpful if each of you could share, if you're going through that approach, whether you've gone through it in a past organization or whether maybe in the future, that may be a thing. When you think about layoffs in terms of either the chronology, like what do you do and when do you do it, or the things to remember that people tend to forget, or even just principles to lead in with, what wisdom would you like to share with folks that are listening?
Yeah, I can go first. Again, the transparency. Why is this important? Why is this essential? Where are we as an organization that necessitates layoffs? What were the alternatives we considered? In some cases, businesses pivot. In some cases, you're sort of slowing down. The market is slowing down. And you just level with people about this is really critical for the long-term health of the business, but also treat the people who need to, who have been selected to be laid off with as much humanity as you do the people who are still around, right? Make sure they have a soft landing if you can. Frisk your network, talk to people. Just be very clear. Don't send out vague emails about, 15 minutes from now, people are going to find out that they're laid off and we're just sending an email to everybody. I mean, just some very common sense behaviors to not leave people in limbo. Being as clear as you can. Obviously, there's some concerns about leaks and who's on the list and who's not on the list and things like that, but be as humane as you possibly can be and really have a plan for the people who are affected and the teams that are near the teams that are going to be affected. And then also just your broader population in terms of this is why we're doing it. this is how it's going to happen, and just be clear every step of the way. And then make sure that you have a reasonable landing for the people that you can no longer keep on board. This all sounds very theoretical. I mean, I think we've all been at a company that has gone through layoffs, either as a person who has been laid off or somebody who had to make decisions about those layoffs, or, an adjacent team. Just keep your humanity, right? And be clear. Just keep communicating. And again, I hope you've got some trust built up in that trust bank, and it's not just a declarative. It is what it is. You're not on Zoom crying and laying off people in an unhumane way. Super important.
Gerhard, does that resonate with you?
Totally. So I think also, if you look at it, there's two separate parts. There's the folks that are getting laid off, and there are the survivors, the people that will stay on. And it's different strategies for the different ones. And I think trying to sugarcoat it too much, trying to pretend it's not happening, what is happening to folks is not a good idea. So we need to be transparent. You need to be decisive. You need to be very humane. You do as much as you can to make that as easy as possible, but it's a reality you can't run away from. The longer, the longer follow-up is with the folks who stay. And it's important they understand the why. And it's important that you understand their concerns and help them adjust to this new state of the world and this new organization. One thing that, when change happens, change is considered generally scary, right? Especially scary change. But change always brings opportunity, and working with people to creatively go and identify this opportunity. Often when something like this happens, people get an opportunity to step up and take on a broader role, or take on more responsibility, or learn new things. So actually going and not just leaving that to chance, but being deliberate about identifying the opportunities that this new change brings. That should be the majority of the future focus, and deliberately investing and managing folks through that.
Yeah, we've all heard terrible stories, right? Like, if you're a crappy boss and you do a layoff in a terrible way, like, you hear about it, it's in the news. We think we all have a lot of data points as to the anti-patterns for how we don't want to do layoffs, but there's not really like a playbook for how to do it right. Because I don't think there's a right answer for every organization. You have to know your people. You have to know what their concerns are. The reasons for the layoffs. It could be a bunch of different things. But seriously, avoid those anti-patterns like crazy, because oh man, it's just awful.
Yeah, I know we've definitely heard some of whether it's a stern Zoom or like tears streaming down your face that get virally reshared.
Oh man. Yeah. Way to make it about you, CEO. Agreed.
So you both, again, touch on this, the connecting with the people who are actually receiving the news in terms of what needs to be said. And I think rightly, Kathryn, you're touching on that it's not, there isn't a recipe that you have to know, like, what it is that the people on your team are actually either expecting or needing, or, what could calm their nerves, or what they need to hear from a cultural standpoint, which sometimes can differ from culture to culture, which I'm taking a little peek into some of the Q&A. And I know that there's a little bit of a culture question there, which brings me to mentioning to folks, if anybody has any questions that you'd like to ask Kathryn or Gerhard, feel free, or you can upvote the questions that others have asked in the Q&A. So I actually plan to go through that here in just a couple minutes. So feel free to ask your own questions or upvote any existing ones, and we'll ask in order of upvotes. So acknowledging that, we're talking about layoffs, but I'd love to actually broaden this a bit again into kind of navigating change. You both mentioned, again, leading with essentially with empathy and being very clear and decisive with your message, making sure that you're filling the space, so to speak, so there isn't a vacuum in which stories get created. If you think from that standpoint, the types of situations that have happened, what's maybe like a common, maybe not the most obvious ones, like the ones we just talked about, but maybe like a common pitfall that you've seen folks kind of lean into during hard times that maybe they want to avoid from a leadership perspective, whether that's in giving a particular type of news or just navigating change, any kind of common pitfall that you'd encourage people to avoid?
Yeah, I would say top-down directives, right? Like, you have a very smart workforce. You pay people to be thoughtful and creative. Mm-hmm. Open it up with, this is what we need to achieve. These are the goals. These are the principles. We'd like to adhere to our culture and values in getting there. And then really leverage your workforce to help bridge the gap and do the brainstorming and provide feedback. They may come up with a better way to affect change than what you've sort of declaratively stated from the top down, right? Rather than saying, we need to get to X and we're going to get there this way, just say, we need to get to X. How do y'all think we can best get there? And I think that's really powerful. I think that, if you really keep it focused on the goals and not being prescriptive in absolutely every step of the change, that will be, people will be bought into that. People will feel ownership and agency over the changes as they're happening. And I think that's a really powerful mechanism. And you have to be okay with the fact that folks are going to come up with different solutions than what you came up with. But that's okay as long as those objectives are being met, right?
You talk about something like subtle but important around like not just being a decisive leader from the top down, if you will, but being a decisive but open leader. It reminds me of Adam Grant, who seems to be going viral all over LinkedIn. A book that I read of his many years ago, Give and Take, talks about the research about leaders and people's desire to follow those leaders, and that those leaders that are decisive and clear but not open are leaders that people are less excited to follow. A lot of research shows than those who express that openness and that willingness to collaborate on solutions.
Imagine we need to save money and this is how we're going to do it. You don't know every aspect of the company and how you can save money. Instead, throw this out to your developers and they'll be like, you know what? We're not being as efficient as we could be here. We're not, and have that come from the bottoms up. You've still set the same goal, right? But now people are engaged and they're invested in the overall outcome rather than just griping about these wackadoo missives coming from up on high.
Absolutely. Gerhard, does that resonate with you? And you have any other, pitfalls to avoid?
Yeah, no, that definitely resonates. The other pitfall related to this, so when you do go and give direction, in the sense of a goal, not in terms of how to achieve it. Sometimes when it's a tough topic, people like to be vague for some reason, and that leaves ambiguity. So now you want people to go and solve the problem, but one half of the org thinks we're going, to Tahoe, and the other half thinks we're going to LA, and that's not going to work. So being very clear about the parts that you do communicate. Don't go and add a bunch of ambiguity to a difficult situation. And then,
that's hand wavy. It's hand wavy leadership, right? And if you're not the kind of leader that's receptive or open to feedback, you're not going to know how hand wavy it is. You're just going to have people going off doing their own thing, right? But if it's does this make sense? Does everybody understand? And then you get critical feedback and then you adjust. You're like, oh my gosh, I wasn't super clear. So let's work through this and make sure that everybody understands where we're headed. And I'd pick Tahoe every time. No offense.
Good.
Well, I hear from both of you. If nothing else, you're being super clear about being super clear. So being super clear definitely resonates. So great. I'd love to go into these questions that folks are asking. So first we have Puneet, who's asking, how do you go about handling employees who struggle with issues that are beyond your control? As an example, a good performer going through a phase of low productivity due to a divorce or mental health issues. How do you go about handling that situation?
Yeah.
Not easy. Yeah, no, it's not a layup. So
this is, I think that everybody needs to be able to extend some grace to blips in performance and ebbs and flow in performance, because we have things happen to us in our lives that are out of our control. Getting COVID, I have had an employee go through a divorce and, was very upfront with me about, I'm not going to be able to participate as much as I would like to over the course of the next few months. And I'm like, you're an excellent performer. It's okay, right? You can have this sort of sine wave of performance, but keep the dialogue open. Talk about what you can expect. How can you be supportive as a manager? But I think what's really important in some of these cases, like at some point in time, and this is the hard call, at what point in time is it like, it's just too long to get somebody back to being productive? And I think a lot of us have struggled with this over the course of the pandemic. We gave people a lot of latitude, given externalities that they couldn't control. And then at what point in time do you say, okay, now we need to start seeing that performance ramp back up again, because this can't be a forever thing. And that's, a conversation with you, the person, and potentially your HR business partner to figure out like what is reasonable, what is a reasonable expectation. But we all have ebbs and flows, and we need to be very human and graceful about those ebbs and flows and not expect 110 performance 110% of the time, because it's not sustainable, right? We all have good days, good months, bad months. And you have to trust with the employee to be clear with you about their expectations and your expectations, and you just keep an eye on it. But at some point in time, you have to say, okay, now it's been a year. We're starting to really see some impact, and we need to talk about what are some options, next step options.
So it sounds like being understanding and compassionate of the reality of the sine wave, as you said, of the fact that sometimes productivity is not always going to be optimal, particularly when people are going through hard times. And at the same time, the business has to run, the business has to be successful. So you kind of have to know when is too long.
Right. Find that balance. Yeah. There's no silver bullet here. It's a case by case basis, and it's so tricky. But definitely find that balance.
Gerhard, does that resonate with you?
Very much. This is a great question, by the way. Any manager at some point is going to have to deal with this. It's just one of those things. And it's one of the hardest things. The reason why it's hard to deal with is at a point in time, you're going to treat two people very differently. You're going to let someone, quote unquote, get away with something that you won't let someone else. And how do you now rationalize this, understand this? Because we want to be fair, right? Especially as engineers, we want to. So I think the thing that anchors the relationship is that, the two ends of the social contract. The one end is someone is hired to deliver some impact, but on the other hand, there's an expectation that we acknowledge and know that we are humans, and humans are complex things. So basically, what works for me in these situations is to actually go and have that conversation and make it very explicit and say, hey, this is what's happening. There's some expectation of impact, but it's not this like perfect machine that runs, right? We will acknowledge that there's a human angle, and we will be compassionate. And then it's a negotiation. And the expectation is, yes, for a point in time, we will, expect less, but at some point we expect it to get back.
Yeah. And does it make sense for them to go on leave and make that okay? Destigmatize that. We offer leave, and if you need to take leave to deal with personal issue, elder care, child care, et cetera, personal issues, like please take advantage of that. So then you don't have this half in, half out, feel guilty about you're not being able to live up to your commitments, et cetera. So that's definitely an option that I want to make sure we destigmatize.
I appreciate you surfacing that. Definitely benefits are in, right? Because retaining top talent, even in a crazy market like this for engineers, is no easy feat. Thank you, both of you. Wise words, both sides. I'd love to get this next question from Rowan. This one is about culture. And it's interesting because some folks listening might say, everything I'm hearing about like being clear and being empathetic but decisive, like maybe my culture feels like it's very different. Maybe in your either whether it be a country culture or just the culture of the organization, it feels like that's a challenge. This particular situation that Rowan is surfacing is one, though, that I imagine many of you may face. And so the question is, how do you bring together two different teams with different cultures? one who's quite vocal and communicative versus the other where there's extremely low engagement. So this is kind of like, whether it's hard times or not, it's maybe a hard time created by the nature of the teams that you may have inherited or in the company that you joined. But do you have thoughts when you have those two different teams? How do you navigate that situation?
Oof, that one's hard. You got to make sure that the very vocal and engaged team doesn't shout out the team that is sort of low engagement. But if you can inject some sleeper cells into the low engagement team and start to bolster them from the inside out, make sure they have a voice. Maybe think about different ways of communicating. Maybe you move to memos, more things that are written down, more asynchronous communication. Begin having conversations with the people on the low engagement team that like, hey, engagement is a part of the job. So let's pick it up here. And this is what it looks like. But yeah, that one is super tricky, and it's the low engagement team. Like, there's obviously potential there, hopefully, and so it's in your best interest to get them more engaged. And if you can do that by osmosis, by modeling that good behavior, by incentivizing more engagement, root cause analysis on what the heck's going on. Like, why are they not bought in? Is there something to do with their leader, or if there's a bad apple on the team, or they haven't had clear expectations set or goals? All of those things you want to sort of get to the bottom of, but be very cognizant of not letting the very high engagement, high communication team shout them out. Because that could be a big pitfall there and just reinforces bad habits.
I'm going to take this thing from a slightly different angle, bring a perspective here. One of the things I love about teams, I love like my teams to be relatively stable, have very clear and strong ownership. And one of the reasons I love that is because teams can develop their own personalities. I've had teams who are like super bouncy and emojiing everything and shouting and running around, doing great work. I've also had teams who are like quietly in the corner, doing their thing very precisely, doing amazing work, right? And what I have found is if you try and bring the one culture to the other one or vice versa, or you mix those teams up, it doesn't always work. Right, so it's like the oil in the water, right? So I can have my oil in its can, and I can have my water in its bottle, and it works, and that's fine. So I'm a big fan of like really not just allowing teams to be different, but encouraging them and letting them. There's this point where the team starts developing their own in jokes and their own little rituals and stuff, and then that's a sign of a well-oiled team. So I know there's a comment about low engagement, so I don't want to say. I'm not sure. Maybe this team is just, if a team is just like generally not performing, that's a different thing. But if you have a team that's quiet and a team that's loud and rowdy, that's actually cool, and let them be.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, this is the difference between an extrovert and an introvert. They both have amazing things to say. They're just going to go about it in a different way. And one's not right or wrong, but you got to make sure that extrovert doesn't drown out the introvert, right? I was keying off of low engagement, and to me, that's a signal that they're just not into it, right? Mm-hmm. And they're not passionate about their work, because you can have a very quiet, highly engaged team. But yeah, that's an excellent point. You don't want to homogenize all of your team cultures. You want to sort of lean into the differences as long as they're productive, right? And engaged.
And values compatible. But it's like, if you look at a company's value set, some teams are going to spike, you expect a baseline enough from everyone, but you should be cool with some teams being more spiky on certain pieces. And it's actually fun. It makes a more interesting environment for sure.
Of course. Yeah, that makes absolute sense.
So it sounds like you both are talking about kind of like team cohesion mattering above all else, honestly, and that sometimes that cohesion warrants being very sensitive to who you put with who, and sometimes oil doesn't mix with water, as you say. I think that's spot on. And when we think about Google's research from years ago on psychological safety, right, and that the excelling of teams exceeding those of the individual. If you have a bunch of people with top IQs, they're not necessarily going to outperform a team that's more average but has much higher psychological safety. So team cohesion sounds like a big thing. We
Better
have
together trademark, yeah.
We have about 3 minutes. I want to see if we can do a little bit of like a lightning round, if you will, in terms of questions. So maybe like a 1 or 2 sentence, quickest version, or we'll just pass. So first one from Constantine. How do you motivate people when you're a manager and you don't believe in the change or company direction?
The beatings will continue until morale improves. Oh, God, this one is so hard, right? We've all been this place where you're like, I got to toe the party line and I got to do what's right for the company. And at the same time, I have to meet people where they are. And if my heart's not in it, they're going to kind of sniff it out sometimes. Sometimes I'm just transparent about it. Like, we have to disagree and commit, right? These are the business reasons. They have broader context. They have rationale behind why this is important. So let's lean into it and get it done. Let's not sabotage what we're trying to accomplish here, because that's just not going to be, great baseball.
Got it. Disagree and commit. Gerhard, thoughts? Any further thoughts on that?
Yeah, the sabotage comment is very important. Compartmentalize, because you're dealing with two things. You're dealing with, I disagree with my management chain, and I'm like, I have to motivate my people. They're separate. At the point in time, you have to accept that you need to lead your people through this, your team. And if you do it half-heartedly, you risk alienating the entire team from the company. If you really don't believe in it, you need to take up this matter with your chain and go and either get them to align to you or realign to them. But it's you cannot go and poison your team or let it leak through that you're in vast disagreement with the company.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not easy. This next one from Stephanie. If your company recently did a layoff the wrong way, how can the engineering management team or others help repair some of the trust damage that has happened as a result?
Start by admitting it, right? You have to get in front and talk through to say, hey, we did this, didn't work. And then making a commitment at that point is important, because you need to build trust back. And you build trust back by understanding what folks need, promising that they'll get it, and then key thing, getting it. So whatever promise you make, that first promise, you need to absolutely deliver on. And then you just start building back your trust.
Yeah. Yeah. If you pretend that it went well and it didn't, and everybody knows it didn't go well, either you look like an out of touch idiot or you're gaslighting your people. So acknowledge it, sunshine. We hear you. This went wrong. This can go better. We will do better the next time. Like the true measure of an organization is how you learn from your mistakes, and you can't learn from your mistakes if you don't sunshine them. So
I love that you use the word gaslighting, because it's one that actually people don't use very often in the workplace, and yet it happens all the time. Like sometimes, large organizations, you do performance reviews with calibrations, and sometimes you come from a calibration, and it's hard if you don't want to gaslight, but you need to communicate that commit and disagree thing. I say this as somebody who's working on a performance review redesign product. Next question from Denise. How can we work with negative management level personas to spin them to a more, I'm like, this one just disappeared, to a more positive outlook?
Goodness. Yeah. Some people are just grumpy and negative, right? But I think it's useful to give them the feedback. That's not really helping their cause. Like, maybe give them some examples about, this is where your negative outlook is really negatively impacting the team at scale. That's the problem. When you have somebody grumpy in management, if you have somebody grumpy in directorship or like VP-ship, oh my gosh, the influence of that grumpiness is immense, right? So, some folks are just grumpy in their DNA, and are negative and see the negatives, but I would really work on pointing out that's not helpful. It's actually harming your ability to land the plan and execute. So let's work through some examples here of how you could have reframed what you're saying. Even if you believe that, it's super negative, you can do a much better job when landing the plan with your teams, and sort of how you outwardly emote. Feedback. Does
that resonate with you, Gerhard?
It does. Humans are, the ones we work with, we should assume are generally rational. There's often a reason why they're doing this, right? So Go and understand it. Go and understand why are they reacting like this. Once you understand that, the tool that's good that I like to use is storytelling. Go and engage them, and if you want to show them a different perspective, go and tell them a story. Not like Bible, but like
storytelling is one of the greatest tools that we can use as leaders, right? That's awesome. Well, we have run out of time. In terms of just takeaways, I hear a big focus on transparency and humanity, being human yourself and sharing and being as empathetic as you can with that humanity, being very, very clear and decisive and proactive in your communication, being accounting for the culture and making sure that you're sensitive to team cohesion over individuals, being forgiving about the things that come up for individuals when they need to, but also taking in mind what the business needs, that sometimes you have to kind of cut it off, and ultimately being a compassionate, decisive leader. So with that, I want to thank you, Kathryn, so much, as well as you, Gerhard. It was really great to get your wisdom, and hope to see you again soon.
Thanks.
Thank you.